Hi, I'm Phil Harbottle, and this is my 50-second video discussing British science fiction. Following on from my last video, I'd like to take a look at Gryphon's Golden Amazon series. In 1939, the typewriter John Russell Fearn was doing a terrific business, writing as Thornton Eyre, Polton Cross, and himself for the American pulp science fiction magazines, especially Amazing Stories, where he was successively awarded cover stories under all three names. Here we see Amazing for April 1939 with a cover story, World Without Women by Thornton Eyre. Next is the May Amazing, which has Secret of the Buried City, this time by John Russell Fearn. And the hat trick was completed in June with World Without Death under his Polton Cross alias. 3 successive covers under 3 different names. So when Fearn learned via his American agent Julius Schwartz that Amazing's editor Ray Palmer was buying material for a new companion magazine, Fantastic Adventures, and offering a $75 bonus for best story in an issue, he had the brainwave of creating a new regular character for it, Violet Ray, otherwise known as the Golden Amazon. Her origin story, The Golden Amazon, is by Thornton Eyre, appeared in the 2nd issue, July 1939, The Fantastic Adventures, as a 10,000-word novelette. We see the magazine here, featuring a novel, a new story by Edgar Rice Burroughs. And bear with me. There we see Fearn's Thornton Eyre novelette, The Golden Amazon, the origin story. Yeah. The character of the Amazon was Tarzan-esque in origin, an infant lost in the jungle. But Violet Ray had been lost in the jungles of Venus, not Africa, the sole survivor of a sabotaged spaceship crash. Brought up by Venusian natives, she had matured in the alien environment of Venus, which had imbued her with super strength. Her intelligence had been enhanced to match her physique, enabling her to educate herself from books and tapes inside the spaceship that had crashed on Venus. The girl had developed into a lone wolf, utterly ruthless and alone to herself, dedicated to finding and smashing the criminal saboteurs who'd caused the spaceship crash, killing her parents along with the rest of the crew. But she was still innately female and capable of falling in love. The Golden Amazon was an immediate hit with readers, who voted it into first place ahead of the Edgar Rice Burroughs novelette, thus winning for Fearn a $75 bonus and opening the door for sequels. But by the time the 4th Amazon novel had appeared as a cover story in 1943, Fearn had already decided to quit writing for the American pulp magazines. There we see the 4th Amazon novelette, which made the Malcolm Smith cover, Children of the Golden Amazon. But as I've said, by the time that had appeared, Fearn had decided to quit writing for pulp magazines. The principal reason was financial. He'd fallen out with his American agent, claiming that he had not received recent and substantial monies due from sales to Amazing and Fantastic Adventures. Fearn's appeal to publisher Ziff Davis and editor Palmer had fallen on deaf ears. They had paid the money to the agent, they said, so that was the end of the matter so far as they were concerned. Always a mercurial, impulsive character, Fearn decided on a complete break from his agent and his established pulp markets. Although the money would eventually be received, he broke with his agent and launched a serious attempt to establish himself as a novelist in his home country of England. In this he was successful by adding crime, romance and western novels to his repertoire. However, throughout the war years, Fern had pondered on the character of the Golden Amazon and her vast potential. He'd created her for fantastic adventures, but resolved not to write for that market again. The idea remained that she was too good to lose, he later recalled, so I decided to make a full-length book about her. To do that, Fern had to completely jettison all of the pulp elements in the stories, and indeed the entire plots. He upgraded his writing immensely in the process. On the 4th of January 1944, Fern wrote to his friend Walter Gillings, "To World's Work I have sold The Golden Amazon, a British version of the American Thornton Ayre shorts, but with no possible resemblance to them except maybe the title." In November 1948, he wrote to Gillings again, sending him a short history of his Golden Amazon series of novels, of which there had then been 6 titles published to date, and the 7th pending. In The Golden Amazon, the first novel about her, published by World's Work in April 1944, she was a baby lost in the Blitz, operated upon by a super surgeon. He changed her glandular structure, which at maturity would mean that she had more than human strength, brilliant intelligence, and an almost sexless outlook on life. The surgeon's idea was that she would lead the world to eternal peace, but he'd miscalculated, and her incredible knowledge of science practically led her to destroy the world by her finding of atomic power, prior, be it noted, to the actual discovery of the atomic bomb. In this novel, she also discovered synthesis, including how to make an exact image of herself, and by this means she escaped punishment, as the world, seeing her die, assumed she was done for. Actually, it was a synthetic image which had died, and that paved the way for The Golden Amazon Returns. The Golden Amazon, however, attracted the attention of the Toronto Star Weekly when it was submitted to them, and they had published it also in the March 25th, 1945 issue as the Novel of the Week. Here we see that first reprint. The Golden Amazon appeared in the Star Weekly in 1945. That was a colour illustration by Bill Book, and we can see that on the back cover. That's the title there. And since that was published, since that time, every adventure of the Amazon was first published by the Star Weekly, and then the British version by World's Work. But the World's Work had paper shortages, more paper trouble than the Toronto Star Weekly, which explains why the latter had published 7 novels by the time World's Work were just issuing the 2nd novel. With The Golden Amazon Returns, this book here, which concerned itself with missile attack and atomic power, as it well might be in the future, the superwoman seemed to settle down into a routine job, namely the advancement of Earth's scientific culture on the one hand, and the routing of menaces, physical and scientific, on the other. She became a kind of super female Robin Hood, with scientific trimmings, outwitting every kind of public menace, from shady financiers to master scientists. With this novel came the beginnings of space travel, which were carried a stage further in The Golden Amazon's triumph, wherein the conquest of Venus was attempted, to a great extent successfully. Much business was left unfinished, however, and a Venusian menace returned in the Amazon's diamond quest, said menace being effectively routed this time. In fact, it was not the main plot. That consisted of the discovery of a cavern of pure diamonds created by volcanic action, which the Amazon had to protect from thieves, both Venusian and earthly. Now that Venus is safely in the bag and the space line established, not by the Amazon, who is a lone wolf, but by her friends of the early days. The Amazon can apparently relax somewhat, but she finds that the menace of the earlier stories, Carl Muller, had a daughter who, now grown up, proves as big a nuisance as her father. So in The Amazon Strikes Again, the Amazon sets off to deal with this scientific young woman. See her there. Carl Muller's daughter. And her adventures carry her from a subtropical basin at the South Pole to the planet Venus once again. Here on Venus, the menace angle is finished completely, and Venus is out of the picture, now a safe colony of Earth. In Twin of the Amazon, pursuing her ideal to make the whole solar system one union of the universe, the Amazon next set out to conquer Mars, to bring the apparently empty planet next in line as an Earth colony. But the hidden Martians have similar ambitions for the Earth. The upshot is, after the Amazon is duplicated by the Martian Controlix and the Earth brought nearly to ruin because of it, that the last of the Martian armadas are tricked by the Amazon into being hurled into the sun. This leaves Mars as an empty world to be taken over. But the atomic power plants of the space machines, which had been flung into the sun, have a detrimental effect on the sun itself. This is the main theme of Conquest of the Amazon. In this yarn, the Amazon, with a new character, Abner of Atlantis, fights this time to restore the sun to its former glory, and at the same time has to live down the blame for causing the trouble. And so it goes on. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and beyond. With a woman like the Amazon, anything can and probably will happen. In my previous video, number 51, I described how I sold all of the Golden Amazon novels to Gryphon Books, Gary Levise's New York small press science fiction rediscovery series between 1996 and 2006. Here we now see all of these editions. Gryphon Books. All these books you see here are Gary Levise's Gryphon Books series. In common with these contemporary science fiction writers, Fern operated on a canvas that was astronomically correct in terms of the limited knowledge of the 1940s. Venus was like the Earth of millions of years ago, and the atmosphere of Mars was thin but still breathable. Although those theories were already under challenge, science fiction authors continued to use them into the 1950s in order to make their stories more exciting. But seeing that his series had legs and would soon become dated, Fern realized that to keep ahead of reality, he needed to move the Amazon further into the future and beyond the solar system, into interstellar space and to the stars. So, with the seventh novel, that one, he introduced a new main character, Abner of Atlantis, someone as equally intelligent and even stronger than the Amazon. Fern's strategy was a great success, and the Amazon novels, now rebranded as the Cosmic Crusaders, retained their popularity, ending only with Fern's tragically early death in 1960 after he'd written a further 20 Amazon novels and made brief preliminary notes for his next, which I myself would later write. After Gryphon had published the seventh novel, Conquest of the Amazon, I took the opportunity to produce something different and special with this book, Gryphon graphic novel number 1 in 1998. As I noted at the beginning of this video, Fern had first created a prototype Amazon in a series of novelettes in Fantastic Adventures magazine. This book here had the first ever reprinting of that Amazon origin novel. It was printed there. Also had the first American printing of a Ron Turner comic strip adaptation of Conquest of the Amazon. Also presented another Ron Turner comic strip, which I wrote based on a Fern novel. My own character, Nick Hazard, Planet of Doom. And lastly, to complete this unique little book, there was another comic strip adaptation of The World That Dissolved from a 1939 Amazing Stories story as by Porton Cross. So that was that. But that was a sort of one-off. A milestone was reached with Gryphon's publication of Triangle of Power in 1999, the first ever book publication of the 9th novel, and thereafter all titles in the series would be world first editions. Tragically, it also carried the last new cover to be painted by Ron Turner, who had died the previous December, aged 76. The Amazon series was continuing to do well, so there was no question of our not continuing with it, but Gary was naturally worried about the cover art. Fortunately, from the time we'd first worked together in 1984, I'd given Ron a large number of personal commissions to both recreate covers and to paint new ones for many of my favourite Fern novels that he hadn't illustrated first time round. So there were now more than enough unpublished covers to use on all of the remaining books. In June 2005, just 10 years after we shook hands at his home in Brooklyn, Gary published Earth Divided. There it is. He published Earth Divided, Fern's last Golden Amazon novel, number 26 in this truly extraordinary series. The Amazon's adventures had begun on the Earth, in the midst of wartime London. Then it extended into an imaginary future in which the Amazon adventured on all the planets in the solar system, from Mercury to Pluto. She had acquired a daughter, Fiona, then the husband, Abner, visited the atomic microcosm in Quorn Returns, and the macrocosm in the Shadow People, and explored the Milky Way and the whole of the rest of the entire universe and beyond. There's no other series quite like it in all of science fiction history. And it was a historic achievement that Gary Levisi, with only the slender resources of a small press, had succeeded in publishing it in its entirety, where the big publishing houses had all failed. Now, each new Amazon novel followed on chronologically from the previous one, ending on a cliffhanger. Thus it was that Fern's last novel, Earth Divided, still in his typewriter when he died, had ended on a tantalizing, inconclusive note, leaving the Amazon saga incomplete. For more than 40 years, ever since I'd first read the novel in the pages of the Toronto Star Weekly, I'd wondered and worried what had happened next to the Amazon, and whether her adventures would ever be continued by other hands. There was precedent with many other great fictional characters, such as Sherlock Holmes and Doc Savage, and for me, the Amazon was in the same league. But who could write that continuation, especially when some of the biggest names in science fiction, such as Robert Silverberg, and E. Bertram Chandler, as represented by the mighty Scott Meredith Literary Agency, had all failed when invited to do so by the Toronto Star Weekly in the early 1960s. Ideally, it would have to be someone who'd read all the stories and who loved the character and understood what made the Amazon tick. I knew of no living authors who met the profile, except perhaps myself. As his literary executor, I'd retyped into my computer scores of Fern's novels and stories to take advantage of the internet as a medium for offering them to publishers. And as I retyped and edited his stories, it gave me a detailed insight into his style and methods of story construction. Beginning in 2000, as a literary agent, I'd succeeded in selling reprint rights to London publisher Robert Hale's Black Horse hardcover series for every one of Fern's many paperback westerns. And it also first published a couple of hitherto unpublished western novels, which I had revised and edited from Fern's original manuscript. There we see a couple of novels first published by Robert Hale. But then, after the supply of Fern novels ran out, after some 24 novels, there was none left. So I hit on the idea of trying to write my own Western novels based upon a number of Fern's Western short stories. In this, I was essentially emulating Fern's own technique, which he'd employed with some of his early science fiction pulp magazine short stories, when he later turned them into paperback novels for the UK. By taking a couple of disparate Western short stories and then revising them to incorporate the same characters and expanding them to novel length, I found I could produce a pretty good pastiche, certainly good enough for Hale to publish. And since all these collaborative novels are still in print today, having been reprinted in paperback by 2 other publishers, they must have had something going for them. Here we see the first of some 4 posthumous collaborations. If we look at the title page there, I acknowledged that I'd expanded this story from a Fern short Western story, Fern short story. So that was working quite well. So now I took 2 totally unconnected Fern short science fiction stories, Chameleon Planet 1940 from Astonishing Stories, and Destroyer from the Past 1942 from Amazing Stories, none of them remotely an Amazon story, and then completely revised and expanded them with new material of my own to short novel length, replacing the original characters with the Cosmic Crusaders. Here we see those magazines. Astonishing Stories, Chameleon Planet, a cover story, is by Poulton Cross. I adapted that novel, that novelette, and also in this book, just bear with me, Destroyer from the Past is on page 230. There you go. Destroyer from the Past, another Poulton Cross novelette. I adapted these 2 stories into my own novel, which are called Chameleon Planet, following on from that one. And that was also published by Gary Levisi. And that tied up all the loose ends that had been left behind at the climax of that, ended on a loose end. It was all solved, and Chameleon Planet ended on a clean finish. Having presented all of the Amazon novels, it seemed a shame that the stories of the Fantastic Adventures prototype Amazon should remain in limbo. Despite being sheer pulp adventure, the prototype Amazon was of some historical importance, having begun more than 2 years before the publication of Wonder Woman, science fiction's more acclaimed superheroine, who debuted in DC's All-Star Comics for December 1941. Wonder Woman Diana Prince was also an Amazon who, with her super strength and intelligence, routed criminals and villains. Hailed by many as the world's first superheroine, she was actually only the second, 2 years behind Fern's Golden Amazon. And so I edited the 4 novelettes to form a novel, The Golden Amazon of Venus. Published in 2006 as book number 58 in the Rediscovery series. Having paved the way for sequels, I then invited other clients of my Cosmos Literary Agency to continue the Amazon saga. I avoided the error of the Toronto Star Weekly by providing writers with a sample novel and a detailed dossier. Brian Ball and E.C. Tubb expressed interest, but the first to step forward and actually deliver the goods with not 1 but 4 new Amazon novels was John Glasby, and they were terrific and faithful to the character, requiring only the slightest editing by me to make them just right. If any man was born to continue the Golden Amazon, that man was John Glasby, whose career had uncannily paralleled Fern's own. Those 4 Glasby Amazon novels were eventually published by Gryphon Books, and they will be covered in my next video. Now, new generations of readers and collectors will surely come to belatedly appreciate this extraordinary series of Gryphon books. All of them destined to become collector's items, all featuring my introductions, but more importantly, all with colourful Ron Turner covers. Now, following Gary's pioneering efforts, an example of what could be achieved by a small press, George Vanderberg's battered Silicon Press in Canada went on to republish all of the Amazon novels in 3 handsome hardcover volumes between 2004 and 2008. They also published an expanded and retitled reprint of The Golden Amazon of Venus, which we see there. It's a paperback, along with several other Fern titles. And here we see the hardcover volumes. Nice big hardcovers into strapper, reproducing the original Star Weekly opening page in facsimile. Interior illustration, and then we see all of the successive ones through the conquest of the Amazon. That was in the first volume, and the second volume continued. See all the stories there. Also did the introductions for them. Now we see the covers again on the back. That's actually the 3rd volume. That's the last one, Chameleon Planet. Here's the 2nd volume. Oops. There's the 2nd volume. All of the Amazon novels. Introductions. And there we see all the remaining Star Weekly items. That's that. After all these Amazon books had been published, I hoped that they would eventually attract interest from larger publishers. Such was the case when I was approached by the late Michael Burgess, aka Robert Reginald, then heading Borgo Books a paperback imprint of Wildside. Now at the time, Gryphon still had some copies of their books unsold, especially the earlier books that had previously appeared as World's Work hardcovers. I was grateful to Gary, now a personal friend, and so I took the fateful decision to withhold books 1 to 6 from Borgo to help Gary to sell out his remaining titles. And here we see all of the Borgo new editions. All with Ron Turner covers, new Ron Turner covers. My introduction in these new Borgo editions explained that their series was being renumbered. Here's the first Borgo book, to restart with number 1, but was actually number 7. Number 2 was 3, and 3 was 9, and so on. This new rebooted Borgo series began with the 7th novel. First published in 1949 as Conquest of the Amazon, I edited slightly as, oh sorry, that's it, yeah. That's the novel I'm talking about. That was the first Borgo book, that's the second one. As well, I edited it as World Beneath Ice, and I rewrote it slightly so that new readers, totally unfamiliar, had never read the novels that had gone before, could begin with that and follow the story quite nicely. It had a cover by Eddie Jones, originally painted for an aborted 1970 edition, but that's another sad story, too long to explain here. All the rest would have beautiful new Ron Turner covers. My introduction also claimed that any reader interested in seeking out the earlier 6 Amazon novels would find that they were readily available on the internet in Gary's earlier paperback editions. Alas, within a few weeks, Hurricane Sandy had struck New York and flooded Levisey's Brooklyn home, destroying almost his entire stock of Gryphon books. This destruction included his unsold Amazon books, putting them out of print. This served to now make the first 6 Amazon novels extremely rare collector's items. Borgo went on to republish all 21 remaining Amazon novels, the last few as Wildside editions, following the sad death of Michael Burgess. He was a fine man and a fine editor who did a wonderful job. But the good news is that all these 21 Amazons have been kept in print by Wildside and are available to buy online. We see them here. But instead of offering them to Wildside, I contracted the first 6 books to a new English publisher, Endeavour Press, who've later rebranded as Loom Books, because they offered to promote them both as paperbacks and as ebooks, and I thought sales would be better. In retrospect, this was another mistake. Inexplicably, they sat on them for years, and when I complained, they eventually published them all as ebooks, all 6 as ebooks, but only the first 3 were done as paperbacks. They only did the first 3. They're very nice editions, which only makes their actions in not publishing 4, 5 and 6, as they were contracted to do, more regrettable. I guess this proves that history repeats. In the 1950s, Fern himself it contracted the Amazons to use the Harlequin books of Canada, famous Canadian publisher. And they had published the first 3 as well, but they didn't publish any more. So books 4, 5 and 6, this is the only paperback edition. The Gryphon books remain, this is the only paperback editions. So they presently await a more reliable publisher. Any offers?